Hey everyone, Aaron here with Elite Watersports. This is our new dog, Boomer. He's a red heeler, 10 weeks old. Welcome to the family. This video is going to be all about forecasting. Our primary focus is to get you more days on the water, especially in this local region of St. Petersburg. So we're going to dive deep into details of what I look at right before we schedule our lessons or right before we leave the shop and get out to the beach. Hey everyone, Aaron here with Elite Watersports. Today's video is all about the forecast in our local region. And we're going to dive really deep into my local knowledge on how I'm setting up all of our lessons and just getting more days out on the water. Of course, a lot of this info can be translated and transferred over to your region. So definitely take a little bit of that. First off, like iKitesurf is going to be the #1 platform. We use other platforms, of course, and we'll get into that here in a second. But iKitesurf gives you real data from real meters. When you jump over to a couple different apps, they're going to give you like more regional forecasts. So say like it's 10 miles an hour downtown St. Pete and 20 at the Skyway, your averages are going to be really thrown off and they're just going to tell you it's not even windy for the day. So we want to dive deep into what's actually happening at our kite spots, specifically like the Skyway Bridge. So today's representation is going to be about how I forecast for the Skyway Bridge. Going into iKitesurf, the paid version is robust. It has so much info. You can become your own meteorologist just from this platform alone. And I don't know what the current rate is right now, but it's well worth whatever the price is. So I'm going to first go and set up my zip code, and that's going to give me the list, and that's going to be basically all the meters in our general region, 50 miles out. Next thing is looking at like the map. The map, if you notice, all these yellow meters are paid versions, and these green ones are actually AI based. So it's like a computer trying to figure out what's really happening in that section based on all the info in the region. The white ones are free meters. And sometimes these meters are located interior or possibly out on a buoy or a marker, or it could actually be more like a NOAA station that's not owned by iKitesurf. All right, so going into say the Skyway Bridge, let's click on that. I like this view, but a better view is going to be going through like the list and then going to the actual Skyway or Egmont Key. Let's go to Egmont Key. And it's going to open up a little bit more info specifically for that meter. So this is kind of where I start my forecast. I start jumping into Egmont or Skyway, and I first want to go into detailed version and open up all the models so I can see what every model was thinking is going to happen. So now the detailed version is going to tell me both archives, so everything that's already happened. So that's it, these thicker lines, like the red is going to be the gust, the blue is average, green is what's on the low side. Some days these are all over the place and don't trend with the forecast models. So these are the forecast models kind of trending off to the right, and then everything that's been observed to the left. If we kind of go in here and see that the forecast and all the models had it a little bit lower at 8 a.m., and we'll jump into why that was here in a little bit. And you can see that it all trended down, leveled out, and you can see throughout the rest of the day, it's kind of trending down almost to sunset to almost no wind, but a couple models showing a little better. You'll end up finding like your model, everybody has like their favorite, but in the end, just look at them all. And that's going to be consistent through everything I teach you today as I look at everything, not just one model. So next thing is I can go down and kind of see a blend and kind of dive deep into each model. That gives me a little bit more info. But where I really jump down to is like the archives. So archives, seeing what happened this week. So I can kind of go on to each day and just see what the trend is. And I like the trend because we have patterns, especially right in the middle of our season. We sometimes have like a 14-day pattern. As we ease into season, that pattern starts going into 2 or 3 days. So you'll start seeing this wind goes up. And say in this case, it's like a 3-day pattern. It starts trending up and then it starts crashing down. And then it'll start trending back up and then it'll start crashing down. You see like Tuesday next week, it's getting lower and then it'll start trending back up. So this time of year being, April, we have like a 3-day pattern. As we go into summer, it turns into like a 14-day pattern. Very crucial info right there. I can also start looking at how much wind is on average. I don't use this too often, except for just a general synopsis. If I'm traveling to a location, what month is going to be the best month on average? So maybe like January or April looks like pretty good months, but October. Obviously, being June and July are lower wind months on average. So let's go into tides. Tides are a super big important deal for me, especially in the sense of understanding what the forecast is telling me versus my local knowledge. When we go into tides are a big deal here in St. Petersburg. And the reason being is that if you have an incoming tide, the water is flooding the bay. And when you have that tide flooding the bay, if you have an opposing tide, say it's or opposing wind, so a northeast wind, that's going to go against each other. That's always going to increase the wind speed. So think about if possibly we have a west wind or a northwest wind, say in our afternoons. Same applies. If you have a incoming wind from the northwest and an outgoing tide, remember the tides also go out through these little spits or the channels and whatnot and passes throughout our coastline. If you have that opposing each other, then you also have an increased wind speed. So how does that apply for me? Well, I go into the forecast, and this morning was a great example of it. So they had forecasted about 15 to 20 mile an hour this morning out of the southeast by, a little bit of east in it. And we also had a tide of flooding. So the wind or the tide was actually coming in, going against the wind. And you can see in the archives from this morning that the wind was actually a little bit windier than forecasted because the incoming tide, and that's local knowledge. So incoming tide with a northeast or a southeast breeze, they're going to be going against each other, and then you'll have more wind than forecasted, giving you more confidence. Just get out to the beach that early morning. It's probably going to be windier than expected. Same with like this evening's sea breeze. So right now it's looking at like maybe like 12 to like maybe 15 for like 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock p.m., maybe a little bit lighter than that. I'm going to go over to the tides and see what's happening. So somewhere in that 3 o'clock range and 5 o'clock range, it lulls off. So that means the tide's going to be stagnant. So chances are the forecast is going to be more accurate, exactly what they're calling for. Anywhere in between like that 10 and 13 mile an hour knots, they're close enough. And then you'll see that the tide is starting to go out. So somewhere around like 5 o'clock, maybe 6 o'clock, the tide starts shifting. The tide starts pushing out. We should see a bump in wind where the wind actually goes up. It actually gets better than most likely forecasted. So 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, they're trending down 12 mile an hour or so. Well, I know that the tide's going to oppose, so this forecast is going to be just slightly underpredicted. Most likely it's going to be a little bit more, and we're only talking about 2 or 3 miles an hour, not like a huge spike 10 mile an hour or more. So giving me some confidence that maybe my lesson shouldn't start at 3, but maybe start at like, 4:30 when that tide starts to level out and start to oppose the actual wind. One app I really like using is called TideGraph Pro. That's on your app store. And the reason being is that our general region, actually, the tide is way different. You could be 3 miles apart and the tide is completely different as far as how high it is or how much it's flooding, or maybe it's stagnant. And what I'm talking about is that, like, when you look at the actual tides, there's going to be a meter somewhere in this location right here that they're predicting what the high tide and low tide is. Then you're going to have one at Mullet Key somewhere right here. Those two locations are going to be extremely different within 6 inches or so. So it could actually be flooding right here and the tide starts to slow down, or vice versa in this other location. So when you use TideGraph Pro, you're actually able to really jump into the actual location, more of a visual approach when they give you a map to select the exact location you like. Now, iKitesurf does that also, but I find myself kind of jumping through this on my iPhone and I'm trying to figure out, locations. Sure, I have it memorized. They do give you all these different locations within 3 to 5 miles. But for an example, Egmont Key, we just looked at that tide. Let's go over to Point Pinellas. Boom. And you can see that the tide levels off a little bit later than at Egmont Key. So a good example of the tides being different at 2 different locations, 3 miles apart. So take note of that. For me, for Skyway early morning northeast wind, I'm always going to look at Point Pinellas and Mullet Key and see if those are kind of aligned with each other for that 8 to 11 o'clock in the morning northeast. I always want the tide to be going in for a northeast breeze. So let's use an example of like when the tide is like lulling off or is still kind of going out the bay, so an outgoing tide. I wake up in the morning, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm trying to get ready, I'm looking at the meters, looking at the forecast, all the meters are about like 10 miles an hour and just kind of flatlined. So if you look at this specific date from last week, you can see that before the sunrise happened, the tide was going out. So here I am at like 6 a.m. looking at the forecast, trying to figure out if it's going to be windy. I look at all the meters say like 10 knots. It's not very encouraging to me. And I see that, well, at daybreak, the tide's lulling off and about to start coming in. And if I have that nice northeast breeze that we traditionally have, I know that at 8 a.m., that tide will start to lull, it will start to come back in, and now the wind should spike. If I were to cross-reference this and go back in the archives, I would know that, this actually came up to about 12 to 15 knots, and it was only forecasted to be about 10 to 11 knots. So great example of like right at 8 a.m., I didn't want to go to the beach at, leave my house at 7-ish. I didn't want to go to the beach because the meters didn't look that great, but I knew somewhere around that 8:30, 9 o'clock a.m. that the wind should start to increase. And well, that's exactly what happens every single time. As soon as that tide starts moving in, wind increases. When you jump into all the different forecast apps, sure, iKitesurf is the bee's knees. It has all the info in one place. But we have a secret weapon in Tampa Bay. And believe it or not, it's Bay News 9. Bay News 9 is extremely accurate, especially when they jump into like the marine forecast. The marine forecast is going to be specific for like southern Pinellas. And yes, it does go into the whole region, but I find that it's really accurate for specifically southern Pinellas and into Tampa Bay. So I always jump into the marine forecast on Bay News 9 and just see what they're telling me. So like 15 out of the south and kind of subsiding to 10 knots later in the day. So that just gives me a little bit more confidence. And sure, you can go north or south with Bay News 9, but also you can go into the 7-day trend, today's forecast, and also radar cameras, and really diving deep into just a different platform to give you even more confidence to kind of schedule your day. One big tool about Spectrum Bay News 9 is that they come out with these daily forecasts, and the daily forecast also talks about the radar and also the projected line. So in Tampa Bay, we have a bunch of cold fronts that come through, and say iKitesurf is saying it's raining all day long. Well, that's just a general region that's somewhere, if they say 60% chance of rain, 60% chance of rain somewhere in our region. It's not exactly where you're standing or exactly at the skyway. It's a 60% chance that you're going to get some rain somewhere in your region. When I go into this today's forecast, if you don't have Spectrum, if you don't have Spectrum cable or internet, you only get about 4 videos per month, which kind of sucks. But it's I save it if I'm really unsure about the forecast. So this is what I'm talking about as far as like the actual line of storms. They project that line of storms for you and how it's growing and how it's kind of swooping into Florida. And by looking at the timestamps on what they project is happening, like for this weekend, is that somewhere around like Sunday at 4 p.m., it's going to be offshore. Somewhere about 4 o'clock on Monday, it's going to be offshore. So I would suspect that around Monday, that line into Tuesday is going to be blasting through us. Now, if you're doing this the night before, when we're thinking that this front's going to come through, this is pretty darn accurate the night before. So if I'm worried about the rain and the line coming through, it might say 11 a.m. that line should push through, and by 2, clear skies. And this forecast is going to allow me to have that confidence to know exactly when the rain's going to hit, so we can get out in the water in the morning, have a break when the line comes through, and then the afternoon should be pretty good if it's forecasting to be windy after that. We all like to have free apps. We all like to be able to have a bunch of different resources. So don't get stuck on just iKitesurf. Using like Bay News 9, that's a great resource. The Weather Channel is also another good resource. And what I've found, like the Weather Channel is more of a regional forecast. And if it's all trending 10 knots or so, most likely you can add like 5 or 6 miles an hour to that, knots to that. So it's just kind of giving me more confidence. It also has a free radar. I like to use my Radar Pro. That's a little bit more convenient for me on my phone. It gives me a little bit more accuracy, and I can just jump right into it rather than saving links and whatnot. But yeah, jumping around to all the platforms. Don't just get stuck on one. Don't just open a wind alert and that's it. You have to jump around to a bunch of different platforms. But reiterating that, I always start with iKitesurf just to give me the general feel and see if I should be, diving deeper into this. So in closing, I hope that I gave you the confidence to get you out of the house and enjoy yourself. A lot of days we're at the Skyway and there's absolutely nobody there, but it's ripping because the forecast was wrong. Every night we look at this thing and we kind of go through the same process, and that's why we have more and more days on the water. In the end, if you go to the beach, there's always going to be more wind at home. And also having the right gear, like a 17 and a big board is fine. It's fun. You're out on the water enjoying yourself. If you're getting into hydrofoiling, that opens up so many more avenues, especially to get out in light winds like 10 knots. Who cares if it's 10 knots on a foil? It is a blast, I promise you. So this is Aaron with Elite Watersports. And this conversation, this video could go on forever. But hopefully I gave you just the tip of the iceberg to give you more confidence in kind of how we do things here at Elite Watersports. We'll see you on the water.